Welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave.
And Mackie!
We're broadcasting from Australia for Revolution Radio on revolution.radio, where it's more than just radio, so jump into the chat room if you can. This is show number 375.
570 and 300. That's crazy. 375. That's some kind of anniversary, right?
It would have to be. I had my 275 pin when I was bowling, but 375, it's a whole 100 above that. It's on air, online, and on your smart device, so grab and have to listen from anywhere or listen at home on a Grace tabletop digital radio. If you missed Solaris' show, and I'm bad you for missing it, if you did catch it, you'll know that she had David Sarita on, he's great, by the way, and they were talking about the bloodline of Christ. That's a good topic. It sort of fits in with what we've been talking about in the last show arc. But if you don't know who we're talking about when we say the word Solaris, who also has awesome guests all the time, all you have to do is join the Revolution Radio archives, subscribe to the archives for $5.95 Australian, I think, per month, and that's it. That's a triple shot coffee for me, and that's what that cost. And
that's good for the heart.
that's my second coffee of the day. My first coffee just gets me up, and then I have one of those. And yeah, well, yeah, I'm sure, look, if it makes the heart beat faster, surely it's like exercise for the heart. Right?
That's how it works. Yes, well,
yeah, sure it does. So what you do, you jump into the archives and you got access to every host's shows, and that's great. So then you can download an MP3, and there's even a live web version of it that you can just click on them and listen to them live, which is fantastic. But you need to have a subscription to do that. So jump in and do that. Mackie and I, we live in Australia, and wherever you live, I want you to consider the same thing and say the same words to yourself, but obviously relational to where you live. And that is that we, Shiny Side Out, Dave and Mackie, acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. Where I live, it was the Darkinjung. And Mackie, where you live?
The Rook people.
And we pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. And let us remember that beneath our civilization there is lands which have had stories passed down from one generation to the next 240,000 times. That's something else. That's a long time we're talking about. Now, I've said this is show 375, and this is the Giants Part 8. And when I look, we're just past halfway. It's like five eighths, maybe. Yeah.
About that, yeah.
Which is good. It's good. It's very comprehensive, and I want you guys to stay on track with us. And I'm sorry that I hadn't put the clips up prior to now, just a couple of days ago, but I've now fulfilled those, and we're up to date again. Now, it's news time. Australia voted yesterday. We voted, and there was a millionaire who went bust, who still hasn't paid the staff from the aluminium smeltering business that he ran after collapsing that down, and spent 80 million on an advertising campaign, which is really interesting numbers that I'm made aware of. Some say 22 million, some say 80. Well, the internet was, for weeks and weeks and weeks, every single ad that came up during a YouTube channel video or ads around a page were all Clive Palmer's not One Nation, the other one, Australia Party, right? And there was intrigue, there was a whole bunch of what are all the terms, Mickey? You know, you've got. I mean, honest politics is when you just have your own people on there talking about the policies. So we actually saw a few of those. We saw a lot of mud raking, and mud raking the other people's policies. So downplaying those or not telling the truth about what those outcomes are. And you know what? I don't know. I think I might be a little bit tired of that style of politics. I really do. And I'm sort of leaning a little bit more towards. Leaning says left or right, doesn't it? I'm really leaning towards honest politics, and I know that's absolutely never going to happen.
I'm caught in a toroidal motion rather than leaning. Okay, I'm doing the toroid over here, and just on that. So look, you're right. Clive Palmer and his United Australia Party are. Look, what we're seeing today globally, and it's not just in Australia; it's a global phenomenon. We're seeing a polarization at the extremes. We're moving away from the middle, and we're seeing a polarization. We always see polarization politics when we approach crisis points in history or when things go really sour, right? Which you could argue is happening right now. Now here in Australia, Clive Palmer is a billionaire. Yeah, let's not make no mistake.
Sorry, Clive.
He's a billionaire, and he's the guy that didn't pay out his people when his company or one of his companies went bust. Just before the election, though, he put $7 million into a fund to pay those guys out. Yeah, that wasn't motivated by the election at all. I wonder if there's any money left. I wonder if there's any money left in there today, Dave. I wonder if there's any money left.
I think there's still got $7 million in it.
I think it'll stay there forever. Yeah. But the point is that, yes, I think David is right. Clive Palmer engaged in what I guess you would say is a fifth column work. He and I hadn't seen it this way, but Dave made me aware that you can look at it this way, that he probably drained away votes from the Labour Party.
From the major party,
yeah. There's a fundamental rift in Australia at present. It's a fairly fundamental rift, and there are two main topics that inform this rift. As far as political parties concerned, so you've got the Liberal National Party, which in America you probably call the Conservatives, the Republicans. Over in Germany, there would be the CDU or CSU. In Israel, there would probably be Benjamin Netanyahu's bloc. So those are those guys, the more conservative and probably more entrepreneurial, less tax, less big government, and all that wonderful stuff. And on the other side, you've got Labour Party, and as the name says, while not being a socialist movement per se, certainly unionist in nature, right? A lot of the great labor leaders found their rise or found their voice in the union movement. Mm-hmm. Yeah, their feet, exactly, in the union movement in Australia. Now, from a policy perspective, there are two differences here. As I said, one is around taxation and the welfare state. You can imagine where Labour and Liberal land on either of those. And the other is around the environment and the related topic of climate change. And it's really interesting. Obviously, it seems that the Liberal Party is very much in the pocket of coal, of all things, oddly enough, right? Coal seems to be, playing the tune that the Liberals are dancing to. So it's not high on the agenda. For Labour, though, of course it is. And that's probably the main difference that you can see there. This was really a tough one for me, to be honest with you. I can't speak for my esteemed colleague Dave, but I was looking at the environmental policies of Labour, and I was looking at the economic policies of the Liberals, and I was torn, right? I don't like paying tax. I really don't. I don't like being punished for making a couple of bucks, which is what Labour would want to do. But on the other hand, I think it's insane to believe that inaction will lead to some kind of great revelation in the climate change debate, right? So this was a tough one. This was a really tough one for me. Dave, how did you feel about it?
Yeah, look, I share the view that it shouldn't be left and right politics, because I think that itself causes a divide. I think there's only very few things that would polarize you in either direction. I think the things that were more important to me moving forward on this election I don't like all the taxing, but the government has basically has lost some of its income vectors, and so the middle class in every country, because the poor don't pay tax, they haven't got any money, and the wealthy tend not to pay as much tax, and the middle class pay more tax than anybody else. And I feel as though the middle class has stalled or gone backwards, and that available income where people would be, what do they call the disposable income? Reckless spend income. The income that you can have when you've paid all your bills, whatever's left over. There isn't very much of that anymore. And the income vector from a tax point of view, from the things that we used to enjoy a lot more, they're drying up. And so that vector for the government, I'm afraid, has cost a lot of our services to be reduced. So they've got to find money to pay for all these things. It's no different than, a single household today. In the olden days, they had a phone bill, electricity bill, and in some cases there wasn't even a water bill. It was just a fee, and it wasn't a consumption based, so it was just a connection fee and a sewage fee. Now we'll have a pay TV, a streaming service. We have the internet, we have mobile devices, and we haven't even. They're only nice to haves, but these are already things that everybody has anyway. You wouldn't want your child to be without internet, for instance, in a competitive world. So you've got to have it. Right? Then the NBN, that's another whole story. But those kinds of things, and I was talking to my father about it, and it's in his day, there really wasn't that much outgoings. You got less money, and things were cheaper, but the money they got was less, and so an equivalency to today, we're quite well off, but we have so much more draining or vacuuming out the money from our pockets than we've ever had in history. It's really, truly crazy. And I just read a story today that Foxtel it had to borrow $300 million as a cross subsidy to pay some of its debts within, I think, Fairfax, right? Or Murdoch, I can't remember. So while we're looking at a government who has less money coming in to be able to, pay for the things it needs to, just on the blind, like you do for your house rent or mortgage payments, to run a vehicle, you need to buy petrol and insurance and all of those things, registration. Those things have gone up and up and up and up, and I think the cost of living that I'm talking about has prohibited our reckless spend or our disposable income to the point where the government is having a hard time. I don't think increasing taxes is any way to go forward. We need to relieve the taxes to have people spend more, and then their vector goes up. And unfortunately, the only way to make even more money in where you should be is taxing multinationals, who seems to be able to get away with everything. Unfortunately, that's a really hard place to put yourself, because then you end up, an iPhone's going to cost, $3,000. Thinking about the money that the company wants to make from that as profit. Really find it a hard existence right now. And those choices that the governments, all of the sides were, basically dictating, these are the things you need to decide upon, because these are our policy statements. So one was, climate change, one was taxing big business, one was trying to tax the wealthy more, the other one was providing more services, and I've always argued, when you're talking about services, if you're talking about health, education, and infrastructure, they should already be adequately funded to the point where you would never have to discuss them ever again. We have a large coal mine going to be, proceeded with in
Dave,
Queensland, right?
We've lost the studio. We seem to have lost the studio.
It's still connected to the. Are they saying that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Are you still there?
Yeah,
Are you with us? Yeah.
I'm here.
No. I can see that Revolution Radio is still in the chat as well. So I don't know. Huh.
I'll just check it.
Okay. Yeah.
But if it's only SJ who's having the problem, I'm just going to check the audio.
Blasphemous Buddha still said the same
as
thing.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I might drop it from the call and re-add it again. Hang on a second.
Okay.
You get that? One more time. Add it. Add. Should be calling it back again. Hopefully that's going to pick it back up. It's not got that funny icon on it anymore, so that should work. All right. So just give it a sec, guys.
Yeah. Yes. We should be coming back in a moment. In case you can hear us, this is Revolution Radio, and this is the Shiny Side Out. And we're talking about current affairs, and later we'll be talking about giants. Okay, I assume we're back. Now, look, the thing is this, though, right? We're back. We have to contend with a whole raft of decisions and policies that we do not agree with, Dave, I think is probably the best way to put it. And simply because our politicians, and this is probably a global issue as well, they no longer take the longer view. They don't take the longer view, and there aren't any decisions being made for the good of the country, or the people, or the planet, God forbid, for that matter. Because it's about the next election cycle, which is actually interesting. I just want to quickly fletch this into American politics here as well. Donald Trump, is engaged in some maneuverings around Iran. I don't think Donald Trump wants to go to war with Iran. Having said that, the best way to get reelected is to be at war at the time you are about to be elected. So will we see that? It's a possibility. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but certainly in the past, any wartime leader was very popular, Dave, on re-election. I don't think, though, that we're on a re-election course here right away. On a war course.
You don't?
Yeah.
Because they've got a carrier group there.
No, I know. I don't think it's an immediate
You think
thing.
that's only posturing, right?
It's posturing, but it's not posturing by Trump. I think that what we're seeing here is probably we see pretty a fragmented White House at the moment, and I think he had to agree to sending it because he has got too many generals in his staff that want to go to war, and some quite fanatic people that are really hell bent on the destruction of Iran, or at the very least the deposing of the prevailing regime there. So
it was still the fifth. It was the fifth named country in the list of 5 countries.
Oh no, it is.
I mean, the prior one is Syria. We couldn't understand how anyone was going to go into Syria, and there comes an excuse. And now one's over. It's got to be Iran next, right? That's
well, it's not over because there was no regime change. He's still there.
That's
right. So Syria is not over. Iran, look, Iran. I don't think. That's what I'm talking about. I don't think America has got an appetite. I'm talking about the American people for another Middle Eastern war, especially when there's no real reason for it. I mean, why go to war with Iran now? You know, I mean, it makes even less sense than Iraq at the time. But we'll see. I don't think. I mean, once we get closer to the re-election, maybe. Right now, definitely not. That's
it hasn't
my
changed hands in a war.
No. It's it hasn't ever, not ever. So I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, look, here in Australia, it is what it is. We have to contend with what we have. It would be nice to see something different and something new, something fresh, something, that gives you a bit of a forward thinking, some strategy to the country, some longer term projects. I'd love to see that. I really would.
Do you know what I think? I think, look, the party that won may very well attend to some of the fringier, more prickly things to make them go away, or to appear as though they've touched them. So that being one of the greatest agitators in Australian politics in recent years, is he didn't win his seat back.
Yeah. And so with some upsets. Yeah, you're right. There's some.
He might have had some say in which his vote within the party maybe was one of those disruptors. Maybe they can get some policy happening now, and I know that they've changed their ability to oust the leader. They've said the person you vote in is the person you'll get to the end of the election now, which is that's a big step forward. Because we were making jokes, it's only 3 prime ministers till Christmas. Because we've been changing them so often in the last two, like 4 elections.
On the first day of Christmas, my true love said to me, 5 new prime ministers.
And so, look, we're hoping that we're going to see some change. And look, if the party that's in addresses anything to do with climate, that would be a tremendous step forward. And then the rest, maybe taxing multinationals, the full hog of tax, might allow people to get on with their job, and certainly give the ruling party more money to get action done. And I think that's the big shame. Yeah. Just the shame is that there isn't all that money there. And I'm hoping that we get back to surplus next year. That'd be great. That means we still have debt, just we don't have more spend and we're not going backwards. And that's it. We wouldn't have to borrow any more money to keep moving forwards. And at the moment, the debt it's a little big. It's certainly not anywhere near as large as the US, but it's a difficult position to get yourself out of unless you delete the currency, go bankrupt, or start a war, or there's out of buying yourself back out of the debt. There isn't very many other ways to get out of it.
No,
it looks very difficult to get out of that debt.
And this is really the point of no return for a number of countries, even for the world economy situation we're in. We've lived our lives governed by Harvard economics, which is the economics of never-ending resources and ever-growing returns. Right, so it's a completely.
It's only run by debt.
Yeah, it is. We can only be run by debt because we live in a finite resourced environment, right? I mean, even if you look at the world or even the solar system in totality, we still have only finite resources to play with, and you cannot have infinite growth. It's just an insane statement or insane belief system, and markets don't regulate themselves. They don't regulate themselves, okay? Because people are people, and people are not rational players. But that was the greatest failure over the last 50 years, was the economic theory upon which we had built everything. That was a massive failure. There's one other thing there's a couple more things, but this one we need to cover, Dave. It's very, very important. It's important because it can affect travelers, it can affect us overall. This is from a news article taken from VOA News on May the 18th. So that's only yesterday, and this is around the Ebola outbreak that started August 1, 2018 in Congo, right? So right now, the International Federation of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent Societies warn that the Ebola epidemic in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo could spread to urban areas and across international borders because of heightened insecurity and a serious shortage of money. The DR Congo Ministry of Health reports 1,739 cases of Ebola, including 1,147 deaths, which indicates a 66% fatality rate, which is 2/3. So 2/3 of people that get this particular strain of Ebola will die. Now, this epidemic in conflict-ridden North Kivu in the Ituri province started, as I said, August 1, 2018. What is particularly frightening, though, about this situation, now this is 40 weeks, okay? It's been going for 40 weeks. The latest situation report indicates that 20% of overall cases have occurred in just the last 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so again, not fear-mongering here, really not my intention at all. But the truth is, we're now facing an Ebola outbreak that has been running for 40 weeks, the better part of a year, with clearly a massive increase in new cases, because 20% of the overall cases, only occurred in the last 3 weeks. And due to a lack of investment, meaning in medical facilities, and the security situation, there's no check on this. So people have actually been killed, Dave. I don't know if you know this, working as medical officials.
Yes, absolutely, yeah, I knew that.
Yeah. So this is a very serious situation. My suggestion is stay away from Central Africa at this point.
Yeah, or anyone traveling from there.
Yeah, that's good advice for anyone. But yeah, so this one worries me because it is accelerating. By now we should see a decline in new cases, just going by past data. I've done a bit of research, but we have not seen that. It's
been nearly 2 weeks. The World Health Organization hasn't updated anything to do with the one that ended in 2018, I think, the last outbreak. When this new outbreak has occurred, now they've got nearly 2 weeks ago, they've got a news story coming out here that says the World Health Organization adapts Ebola vaccination strategy in the Democratic Republic of Congo to account for insecurity and community feedback.
Yeah.
I thought that you would put a vaccine out there to prevent deaths. That would be my motivator, but
it's crazy. It's a worry, and I do urge everybody to take travel precautions. But again, hey, in the interconnected world that we inhabit today, that is a lot easier to say than do. Let's look at 1918, or just the years leading up to 1918, the outbreak of the Spanish flu, in a world that did not have air travel the way we have it today. Millions of people dead from the Spanish flu.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mackie.
Terrifying prospect, potentially. And there's an unrelated swine Ebola outbreak in Asia, which is not, at least at this point, transmitted to humans.
What, swine flu again?
It's not African swine fever. It's you can call it the Ebola for pigs.
Oh right.
It's a hemorrhaging fever, but it's of African origin. It's spread into Asia now, and it's actually infected millions of pigs, and they had all been killed. So millions of pigs have been killed, and that of course means a loss of billions of dollars in the industry. This is from a pig-borne Ebola-like virus. It is not known to make people sick. So the point here is, though, and the reason I'm bringing this up.
Look what Avi just posted.
Let me have a look.
200
million. Yeah, that's about right. That's about right.
So 200 million pigs were killed in China recently.
Oh, I would say probably all over Asia, but yeah.
Yeah, right.
That sounds right.
That sounds right. To try to arrest the parasite.
Correct. And now, so what we're seeing, though, and again, I'm blaming the changing conditions on the planet for all of these things, the rise of diseases. It is not just the human race that's affected, but we're going to be affected by proxy and indirectly through the death of other species. Obviously, if an Ebola-like disease kills, that again originated in Africa, and kills off all the pigs, then clearly we won't have as much to eat as we did prior to that. And there are other things, knock-on effects as well. Right? I mean, It could be the next thing could be chickens. After that could be cows, and then on it goes, right? Then there may be diseases that start to affect the insects, and then I mean the bees have enough trouble as it is. But imagine there were a pathogen that came out of Africa or somewhere else, for that matter, that affected bees in large numbers. So it is not a pretty picture, and we don't know what is thawing right now in the permafrost all over the world. We don't know what viruses or bacteria are coming out. One thing I do want to quickly mention, though, and this is I guess the increasing inefficiency of antibiotics. So antibiotics are losing some of their power because the creatures that we try to kill, bacteria namely, with antibiotics are becoming increasingly resistant. So antibiotics do nothing for viruses. Okay, they will not kill a virus. A virus is usually something that you just have to live through. You just have to live through a viral infection like a flu, right? And then, you should be okay. Bacterial infections are different, and usually they're more serious, and that's why we had penicillin for the last 100-odd years. That's becoming less and less effective. It's not effective at the moment, but it's becoming less effective. Now, there's something I want to broadcast for you guys as an alternative. There are bacteriophages. There's something called a phage treatment. Bacteriophages. These are creatures that eat bacteria. Okay? Each bacterium has a phage, meaning a predator. Okay, and there's only very few scientists at the moment, in the world that do any active research into that. But if you're faced with the antibiotic-resistant bacterium, I suggest to seriously look at phage treatment, P-H-A-G-E, bacteriophage treatment. Okay, and these phages, like I said, they eat and kill the bacteria that make you sick. It's not in its infancy, but it certainly isn't as advanced as antibiotics. Because with the advent of antibiotics, the bacteriophage treatment became obsolete. No longer necessary, right? It's no longer necessary. The good thing though is you can't develop an immunity to a bacteriophage. It's like developing an immunity to a tiger. So tigers, when they attack us, they will eat us. Right? You never become immune. It doesn't matter how many tigers you're exposed to. Every single time they're gonna eat you. Okay, you're not gonna be more resistant to tigers over time. And this is the same scenario. Okay, so bacteriophages, just in case you get into some dire straits there. Alrighty, Dave. What else? Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Staphylococcus, Enterococcus, tuberculosis, and Enterobacteriaceae. That's CRE. That's a gut bacteria. These are all now resistant to antibiotics.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a strain. And the tuberculosis one we know about. And that's only, less than 1,000 kilometres away from Australian mainland.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a danger. It's such a danger that we've treated these bacteria for so long that they've adapted. And it was our love for antibiotics that can treat everything that unfortunately didn't kill it entirely, or we stopped treatment too soon and didn't wipe them out, and one survived and one got passed on and one was immune. And this is where we are now. So, Mickey, that was interesting, though, that there is the phage. The phage was actually in Star Trek as well. There was a whole civilization of people who had a phage that was dissolving them, and they had to keep replacing body parts.
Yep. A phage, the word itself actually just means eater, right? Or being.
Mm-hmm.
So a bacteriophage, literally translated, means a bacteria eater. And you're right. There was the phage. I remember there was in Janeway. It was in Voyager. Fascinating. In fact, I liked Voyager. I know people didn't like it. I like Voyager. I like all of the old Star Trek. I hate the new Star Trek, and I hated the Star Trek with Scott Bakula. He killed the franchise for me. But that's just me, Rant. I'm just ranting. I'm ranting.
It's all good. Do you have another news story?
No, that's it, my friend. That's all I have as news. We should look, though, at the situation overall that we're facing presently, right? It's it is not a pretty picture overall. We haven't finished, on a high, and we're not moving to another high globally speaking. There are very few things that can change the course of history at this point, and I don't see any of them coming into being. I mean, there's no global consciousness. There's no global uprising to make a change. What I mean by that is it is okay. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. It's okay to think that you just keep doing more of the same thing, and or maybe you do it a little bit better, or you do make some small changes to your life, and all of a sudden everything's going to be okay. That ship has sailed. We're in a position where the changes required to keep this planet habitable for us, the humans. We need to make drastic changes. I suggest lifestyle changes, and these are some of the things I suggest you do. You might laugh at me and think I'm insane, but I would move away from the coast. Okay, I would move away from coastal regions. I would buy inland property. I would find property that has water near you somewhere. Okay, I would not make any long-term travel plans. Right, I would not engage in education that doesn't have any intrinsic benefit. So learning a job that will be made redundant or is going to be automated is not going to help you, right? I suggest you own your own land and your own house, not a flat. Become relatively independent, a freeholder if you can. But you have to make some changes. You have to move away from areas that are going to implode. Move away from the big cities. Move into a small community. Or if you are in a big city, you can't move away. Create a small community around you, family, friends, whatever it is. Whatever works for you, right? But these are things that you have to do now, because it's not going to get better, and no one is doing anything to make it better. It'll take a miracle, or outside intervention for that matter, to turn the ship around. And I don't know how old you are, all of you out there in listener land. But I'm sure there's a massive mix of different ages, and it is critical that you understand this. It will happen in your lifetime. Even if you're 60 or 70 years old, these massive upheavals you are going to see in your lifetime. You're seeing them today. It is happening today. Yeah, we don't call it what it is, right, Dave? We don't call it what it is. We don't call them climate refugees. No, we don't call them any the diseases that are coming up. We don't look at the root causes for any of this. We just report the news and we move on. There's a reason so many people are fleeing their countries. Okay, they are making plans to abandon their islands in the Pacific. They're making plans.
Yep.
To abandon the islands because they're going away. They're going bye-bye, those islands. Yeah, it's a thing. It will happen. And so those people know they have to make these changes. And popular culture picks up on it. Now living in a city somewhere in continental Europe and continental America, continental Australia or Asia, you feel like, yeah, sure, Mackie, whatever. Some islands, some people in the Middle East running around in Africa, I don't care. You will care when hundreds of millions of people start being displaced. You will care. You will care when you have a heat wave that does not end. It doesn't end. They're talking about heat waves in Africa now, where people can't handle the heat. It's freaking Africa. Yeah? People are used to the heat. It's hot. Yeah? No, this is completely unprecedented what we're seeing here. You're living it.
Remember the fruit bats? We lost 500,000 fruit bats here in Australia. And they've got ways of being able to cool down, but those ways were exceeded by the temperatures. And they were no longer able to do that. And that's just a creature. Imagine if you looked outside and all of the, I don't know, the deer or the buffalo or whatever, right? Just lay dead because it was too hot.
Yeah. Now, the thing is this is really interesting. So this is a natural biological system failing. Right? So the bats can no longer keep cool enough to deal with the prevailing temperatures. Our systems are the same. We have air conditioning systems, which depend on the electricity grid. But the electricity grid has got a certain capacity. It's just how it is. It's physics. Okay, you can't escape physics. And once we have outpaced that capacity, it'll fail. And when it fails, nothing will cool us down.
Mm-hmm.
And we will swelter and it'll be hot. And you will pray you have a root cellar or some kind of shady glen or maybe a pond nearby into which you can immerse yourself, right? But it's going to happen. Our electrical systems, our electrical infrastructure, it's going to fail. It will fail. If you're self-sufficient, great, good, that's good. So you could be okay. But a lot of people aren't self-sufficient. The funny thing is this: in Europe, we don't build air conditioning units into homes. It's just not necessary. It doesn't get hot enough. What we do have is heaters, right? You build heaters. If you buy a house in Europe or even in Northern America, you have a house that has a heater inside of some sort. Okay, because in the winter you're going to need it. Air conditioning is not really a thing. When we had this great heat wave that hit Europe a few years ago and that killed hundreds of people in France specifically, that was due to the fact that these people had no air conditioning. Right? These were usually older people, right? Especially the older people, the elderly, that they was suffocating in their homes. It was just too hot, and they had no way to, of getting cooler. But you can see that for decades or even hundreds of years, people have built in a certain way, and no one ever thought of air conditioning. It just wasn't. It wasn't a thing.
It wasn't hot enough to require it.
No. What for? You're crazy. You don't need air conditioning. But now we've gotten to a point, and this is indicative of the change that we're seeing. If you believe nothing else, believe this. This is indicative of the change we're seeing in the climate. It is getting hotter. We now have to build air conditioning units in Europe. We have to. It is no longer, we should do that. No, you have to do it to live. To live. Yeah, like in winter, you have to have heating to live. Because if you don't, you freeze to death. It gets cold enough for you to freeze to death. So what do? You have heating. Makes sense. You don't die. Good for you. It's the same thing with air conditioning or climate control now, right? In your house. You need it to live, because if you don't have it, you will die. You're going to die if you can't cool down.
Oh,
okay, our body...
Sorry, Mickey, I just want to interrupt here for a minute. So there's only an ability for an air conditioner to work, and once an outside temperature has been exceeded, the air conditioning unit is no longer able to provide you cooled air.
Yeah.
So we've made the air conditioning units so that they work within, a temperature range, but once that range is exceeded, it's a thing. Have you ever been in your car and it's so hot that the air conditioning feels like it's barely doing anything?
Yeah.
Right? But in winter, it's fantastic. You turn on the aircon and you just get icicles all over you, right? Well, there's only a certain ability for the heat exchanger to be able to exchange heat. And if it's actually hotter outside, then the heat exchanger is removing the heated air from your system inside and trying to radiate it out. If it's trying to radiate out and it can't because it's actually hotter, then it can't. And it won't. It'll start to not cool you down. And if you're looking at this realistically, there's a knife's edge or a tipping point at which this is going to become ineffectual. And even if you put air conditioning in, you'll still die because it won't be able to cope.
That's right. Yeah, exactly right. So we are at the mercy of our systems, right? And if the systems fail, what do you do? Because our body has a certain operating temperature or a range of operating temperatures, right? Once you exceed them, those operating temperatures, you're done for. Okay, it's nothing to be done. You will just die. There was a story, Dave, interesting story, because people don't realize how quickly this can happen. This was in America. I want to say it was I can't remember which desert. It was a horrible desert, though. Maybe in Arizona, maybe in Nevada. I can't remember. But two people are stranded in a car, and in the middle of the desert. It's coming on lunchtime, and so it's very hot, right? And one of them decides to go and find help. The other stays by the car. because they're elderly, can't really walk, whatever. So what happens is eventually someone comes by in the afternoon, I guess, and the person in the car is still alive, but not in good shape, and so they go and try to find this other person. And this other person probably had been walking for about 4 or 5 hours, right? Or that was the last time that the friend had seen after that person had walked away from the car. So 4 or 5 hours have passed, and they find this I think it was a man, not very far away from the car. I mean, far enough not to be seen, but not terribly far away, on the ground, dead. But not just dead, completely mummified. Every drop of liquid, moisture, had left that person's body because it was so hot. We're talking about catastrophic dehydration. Catastrophic dehydration. It happens faster than you think. It's a thing. It's the truth, right?
Yep,
and essentially, so he looked like a mummy. Essentially, that's what they found, like a completely dried up husk. Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. Oh, now, Dave, Venezuela.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? I know that there is a situation going on, and Russia. I know Russian troops have been sent in to prevent the Americans from going in. And at the moment, Trump is trying to negotiate with Russia to saying, look, just let us do our thing. And they're saying no. They tried to oust the president, and that failed. And I'm looking at it and I'm shaking my head. Like, why is this still going on?
Yeah, it's funny, right?
Yeah. But it's one of those things. Now, I was watching the news, like the media in our country, and they were talking about Iran, Russia, China, trade wars. And the expert on there was asked a single question, and the question was, and they were talking about China trade war with the US. And that China was taken by surprise by the recent discussion from Trump about the tariffs. And the expert was asked by the interviewer, just calmly and openly, and it seems even like a harmless question. But, what's the worst that can happen? And is there any evidence of this in the past? And the person said, World War III. Yeah. And then the interviewer said, what? No, I'm just talking, what's the worst the tariffs thing can lead to? And they said, trade wars. A trade war can lead to a global conflict. Because you're really just pissing each other off. So much so that you go, I'm not going to take this anymore. You're going to cripple my country. And the thing that the person leading the other country is more intent to do is survive. And you'll put that person into a fight or flight. And they can't go anywhere, they're countries. You can't really go anywhere else. You're really trying to expand your business. Remember this everything that Mackie mentioned earlier, and that was the ever-expanding business, debt, economy that we live in. And so you've got to continually sell more things to more people, otherwise you're going to die. Mm-hmm. And the interviewer was completely flabbergasted by the answer of global conflict and tried to water it down. Like, I didn't mean that the interview would go in this direction. It was very funny. And then they cited all these different examples of world conflicts that have been started by trade wars. And it's a thing. And we have to watch out for it. And it's not something you go in lightly. You don't try and provocate. You try to negotiate.
Look, that's. I mean, ostensibly, World War I was preceded by a massive trade conflict between the Great Britain and German Empire, and it was, it was the old empire falling or failing, and the new empire trying to rise. Great Britain and Germany in that instance.
I'm drawing a parallel somewhere, Mackie.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can, my friend. Now, yeah. So look, trade wars, trade conflicts, they don't hurt anyone but the consumer. Let's be very clear. The people that are hurt are the consumers because they pay for any differences they have to pay for whatever tariffs are being leveled against the products. Because no company is going to eat the tariffs. It's just not going to do that. They're not profitable at that point. But of course, it hurts people in the jobs that produce the goods and services that are being targeted as well. So it is a real thing, and I think it's silly because Donald Trump said we can just build it here in the States. Let's build it here. The infrastructure that is required to build it all in America is gone. It's been gone for 50 years. Okay, it's all been outsourced, offshored, and demolished. Okay, look at the Great Rust Belt. If you want to revive it, great, knock yourself out, right? But it takes time. It's not a tomorrow kind of proposition. But look, the music is going to start soon. This is Listener Funded Radio. I hope you enjoy the content that that we and the other hosts bring to you. So if you can donate, please do click on the sponsors as well. I mean, these are corporate sponsors, but if you see an ad, just click on it. There might be something that you like, need, or want. And Nighthawk and the crew are doing an incredible job giving all the hosts a free platform from which to pontificate, as we frequently do, Dave and I. And in fact, we're doing it right now. So if you like this kind of thing, stay tuned, because after the break, we're going to come back with some giants. And we're going to talk about Polyphemus. Polyphemus first up, that's Dave. And then we're going to talk about the Oni, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff coming your way as well.
There's the music, guys. Take the break to donate. We'll see you after a short break.
Hello and welcome back to Shiny Side Out with Dave and Becky. There you go, Dave. In the background, Dave. Very baritone. Give us the baritone, Dave. Yes, we are going to talk about giants. Now, why are we talking about giants? You say, it's just kid stuff, fairy tales. No, it is not. It is not. I was going to quickly give you a little bit of a tiny overview of what we've covered here. We've covered giants in every cultural context. We have covered giants appearing in virtually any fairy tale in any culture on the planet in very similar fashion. So the giants that we've examined here are born of the earth and some other entity, usually a god or gods or something like that. But it's always the Earth Mother. So the Earth, sometimes as Gaia, represented as an abstract of the Earth. Sometimes a very specific person, like the in the Bible, the children of men from the Earth, like Earth-born women. But it's always Earth women and gods or outsiders, so not Earth-born creatures. Almost every single time. I find this fascinating, Dave, because this goes across all the cultural contexts, right? And like I said, sometimes it's abstract, right? Gaia as the Earth, but I take from that as though that the giants were in fact a hybrid race. They were in fact a hybrid. Okay. Another interesting thing about giants is that I believe they may very well represent us, but in a further developmental stage. So very quickly, we have certain stages we go through in our life. Like we were born, we're toddlers. We're teenagers. We're adolescents. Then we middle aged, and we're old, and then we die. That's really what normally happens. But imagine everybody died at the age of 30. Everybody dies at the age of 30. It's just what happens. Boom, we die at 30. Gray hairs, the frailties of old age, general senescence and so forth would not be something we're familiar with, because everybody dies. Well, when you're 30, you're still pretty well off and healthy and all that, notwithstanding any other outside factors. So we wouldn't be familiar with it. So it would be a developmental stage we are completely unfamiliar with. A menopause would be something unknown to us, right? And other things like that as well. So, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's there. If you live long enough, you go through it. Now imagine that the aging that we all undergo and experience could be switched off. Let's switch it off. Boom, gone. I'm not saying you're immortal now, right? All I'm saying to you is you will enjoy good health and non-aging body until you're killed in some other way. Okay? If you can avoid accidents and being hit in the head by a rock and all those things, then you can live very long indeed. But you're not going to die of old age because old age is now gone. Now, what if we lived longer, we would go through other developmental stages, right? As we live longer, right? We no longer age, we just live longer, and other things come about. You say, oh, that's crazy, Megan. That can't happen. Well, why? We go through it today. We do it today. We start as children. We go through puberty, right? And then, if you're a woman, you go through menopause. These are the major hormonal milestones, right?
Mm-hmm.
It happens today. It's the thing that happens, and it's age dependent. It's age dependent. Okay, now let's imagine that you don't age, though. Let's say you don't get older. You still age, of course, but you don't have the ravaging effects of old age. Yeah, your cell reproduction is perfect. Okay, the telomerase does its job, protects the telomeres. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that's involved as well, other hormones, right, and enzymes and so forth that keep you young physically, right? But your body might still go through other things, through other stages, right? I'm just saying. So I think that the giants could potentially be another stage in our journey towards adulthood, because I think we all die as children. Another interesting thing about the giants is that they are, as I said, mentioned all over the place, different sizes as well. We have found physical evidence, or so we think, and we get to that at the later part in the show, not this time, but there's a great Smithsonian conspiracy, we think. And it is really important to understand the giant's place in our history, because again, the giants are everywhere, and they're usually either related to the gods, right? They're related to the gods, or they're precursors to the gods, but they're always in some kind of relationship with the gods. And then they're also the titans, which are the precursors to the gods themselves. So the giants are sitting somewhere in between, usually the children of the titans, right? Or the children of the gods. That's where the giants fit in. So we're talking about the Anunnaki, the Igigi, most likely the Watchers in the Old Testament, the sons of God, going into the women of the earth, the daughters of men. And, that's when these women had children that were then giants, the great heroes of old and so forth, right? And the Greek mythology, same thing. Every other mythology, Indian mythology, it's all there. Now, Dave, but that's just a little bit of a preamble here. Tell us about Polyphemus.
Yeah, so Polyphemus is perhaps the most famous of the Cyclopses. Remember those in the fables? The one-eyed giants from Greek mythology. According to Homer's legend of the Odyssey, Polyphemus was the son of a sea god, Poseidon, and the sea nymph, Thoosa. He lived on an island, at the island of Sicily, with his fellow Cyclopses, where he tended a flock of sheep. When the great adventurer Odysseus landed on the island, he introduced himself to Polyphemus as No One. Hi, I'm No One. The Cyclops seized Odysseus and his men and trapped them in a cave covered by a giant boulder. He also began eating them. What a great food source these people just arrived. My Uber Eats arrived. Odysseus hatched a plan to escape and drove a stake into the giant's only eye, blinding him. Polyphemus cried out in pain, as he would, and his brother, Cyclops, came to his aid. But when they asked who was attacking him, he replied, no one. So they thought him mad and went away. Odysseus and his crew then tied themselves to the underside of Polyphemus's flock of sheep, so that in the morning, when he pushed aside the boulder to let them out, let out his sheep, the now blind giant patted the back of each sheep as he counted them out, not noticing the brave adventurers clinging the animal's undersides.
Clever getaway.
He didn't feel the rope. He did not feel the rope on their back, but that's fine. I'll go with that story.
True. Why not? Which brings us to the Oni. And these are Japanese giant demons. The Oni, again, giants stretch across all cultural and folkloric barriers. In Japanese folklore, Oni are often hideous giants in demon form. They're depicted looking fearsome with red or blue skin, 3 fingers and toes, and grotesque horns. They're also often naked, save for a loincloth made from the pelts of wild beasts. Described as super strong, they're also very keen on human flesh. This is another interesting thing. A lot of the giants that we've discussed here, Dave, seem to be feasting on human flesh quite frequently.
Mm-hmm.
Oni usually live in hell, having been sent there and transformed into Oni for living an evil life while on Earth. However, the very worst kind of Oni are those who are so unspeakably wicked that they are turned into Oni while still living and roam the earth causing misery to others. Japanese people traditionally celebrate the Setsubun festival in the spring to drive out the Oni. During the festival celebrations, soybeans are thrown in the air to ward off any lurking 3-fingered beasts.
That brings us to number 8, which is the Gog-Magog, the last British giant. Gog-Magog is said to have been the last giant in the British Isles. The source for most of our information on him comes from the Welshman Geoffrey of Monmouth, who in circa 1136 wrote Historia Regnum Britanniae, the history of the kings of Britain, in which he describes how early Britain, then called Albion, was inhabited by a race of giants. One such giant was the 12-foot-tall Gog-Magog, a rough and strong being who could uproot an oak tree as if it were a twig. One day, a group of giants, including Gog-Magog, attacked Brutus, a descendant of the Trojans of Greece, who had claimed Albion as his own. The giants killed many Britons before they too were killed, and only Gog-Magog survived. Brutus took Gog-Magog to his second in command, Cornelius, the founder of Cornwall, who was a keen giant wrestler. The two began to wrestle, and Gog-Magog used his brute strength to crush 3 of Cornelius's ribs. Cornelius was so enraged by the injury that he quickly picked up the giant and ran with him uphill, finally throwing him to his death off a cliff, and thus it's said, ridding Britain of the last giant.
Interesting. Kumbhakarna, giant appetite. Kumbhakarna is a giant demon featured in the Hindu epic the Ramayana. Kumbhakarna was giant in size and giant in appetite, but due to a trick played by the goddess Saraswati, his tongue was tied so that when he tried to ask for a blessing, instead he asked for a bed, and as a result, he was doomed to sleep for 6 months every year. Interesting. Despite being of a generally kindly character, after 6 months of deep sleep, Kumbhakarna would wake up so hungry he would consume anything in his path, including hapless humans. Cannibalism. Well, can you call it cannibalism? Yes, I guess you could. At one point, Kumbhakarna's brother Ravana needed the giant's help to win a battle, but Kumbhakarna was sleeping, and it took 1,000 elephants trampling over him to rise him from his slumber. Kumbhakarna then gamely joined the war against Prince Ram, but instead of achieving glory, he got rather drunk and blundered around the battlefield, doing more harm than good before being killed. Just on that, this is something that just sort of came to me now, Dave, as we are sharing this with our listeners. We do have hibernating creatures in this world. You know, bears, I think rabbits, others are hibernating as well. Why is it not possible? Because we have these stories around Odin's sleep, you know, or sleep that lasts 100 years and things like that. Why wouldn't it be possible for giants or human creatures like us to hibernate? I mean, biologically, we're not that far from bears, really. I mean, you know, it wouldn't take that much of an adjustment. And then maybe it was something that just happened. Maybe that's something that led to the eventual demise of the giants as well, to some extent, the ones that survived anyway, because they were sleeping for such a long time. Because the best way to hunt a bear is when it's hibernating, right? That's when you want to hunt a bear. And that's what our ancestors did, and it's still a quite common practice to capture hibernating bears, because they're off their game, and they're just consuming the food stores in their own bodies as they sleep. But anyway, just a small thought. Maybe we should cover hibernating humans. See if that's a thing. I'll do some research. What's next, my friend?
Orion, number 10. Orion left his mark in the stars. Many different legends surround the Greek giant Orion. In one version, he is an egotistical hunter who brags that he can kill any beast alive. On hearing of his boast, a tiny scorpion stings Orion and he falls down dead. Another story has it that Orion was left blind after he tried to take Merope as his wife, against the will of her father. To regain his sight, Vulcan bid his friend Kedalion to sit on Orion's shoulders and lead him towards the east, where the sun god dwelled. As the sun rose, Orion's sight was restored by the beams of light, that would be. Orion then went to live and hunt with Diana, but her brother Apollo grew jealous of their close relationship, and when Orion was walking through the water with just his head above the waves, Apollo bet Diana she couldn't hit the far distant form on the horizon. Taking the bait, Diana released a slew of arrows and fatally hit Orion. But when the waves washed his body ashore, she realized her grave mistake. Weeping over the loss of Orion, she had placed him in the sky among the stars as the constellation Orion.
Fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. And then look, that's how people remember things, by painting it across the sky. And if you look at astrology, I guess the forerunner of what we now call astronomy. This is probably a canvas, Dave, that lasts for thousands of years and millions of years potentially, right? Because the sky, while it is changing, it's very slow changing. It takes 26,000 years for the Milky Way to turn on its own axis. 26,000 years. And yes, our constellations change. They do, but it takes thousands of years for them to do so. So if I wanted to remember something, I would paint it in the sky. You know what I mean? I would make the reference, and we don't know. Actually, we don't know today when the first astrological signs came about. We don't know who decided that this constellation is called that and this constellation is called something else. Right? We don't even know who the first people were that saw these constellations and painted in the sky this way. Right? Fascinating stuff. It really is. Now this was the fun bit. This is I like the giants as they lit our history and cultures. But let's ask ourselves here for a second, what about humans then in reality? I mean, let's start sciencing for a bit, and I think that'll take us to the end. Yeah, let's do that. Now, there's an article that was written in 2017 that suggests that we, humans, are at the maximum limits for height, lifespan, and physical performance. Right now, and these are newly emerging trends that are being analyzed, and they're suggesting that humans may have reached our maximum limits. Now, of course, these biological limitations may be affected by anthropogenic impacts on the environment, and that, of course, includes climate change, which could have a very negative effect on these limits, potentially. Okay, this review is the first of its kind, and it considers both genetic and environmental parameters. Humans may have reached their maximum limits for height and lifespan and so forth. Now, despite stories that with each generation we will live longer and longer, this review suggests there may be a maximum threshold to our biological limit that we cannot exceed. I will agree with this, Dave, and you know why I will agree with this? Because I think that's what's built into us. I think that's the kill switch. That's the limitation of our biology that was switched on when we were made. When we were made, They sat down, Dave. They sat down and said, Dave and Mackie, they shouldn't live longer than 120 years. That's what they shouldn't do.
Well, it says that in the Sumerian text.
Ah, yes, it does. Not only that,
that very phrase.
Yeah, and we will not only do that to them, we will make them age, right?
Yeah.
So to them, it will not appear as though there were another way of doing things. And we will do this by delivering a virus, a genetic virus to them. Unbeknownst to them, or maybe it was beknownst, it also affected the other living organisms on the planet. And almost every organism suffers some kind of death and some kind of aging process. Not all. This is tricky. This is the critical thing. Not all, but a lot of them. A lot of our fellow inhabitants here suffer from some kind of aging process, but not all. A transdisciplinary research team, going back to the text, from across France studied trends emerging from historical records, concluding that there appears to be a plateau in the maximum biological limits for humans' heights, age, and physical abilities. Again, completely agree. It was put there on purpose, because otherwise there shouldn't really be that, because evolution or adaptation should leave everything very open-ended. And I'll give you the example of a shark or a crocodile, which have changed massively in size over the past few millions of years. Massively. You look at the megalodon, or the large tooth shark. I mean, it's a monster. It eats, it compared to that shark, a great white looks like a sardine, right? And crocodiles used to be much bigger as well. So again, I think that these limitations were put upon artificially. Now, it goes on to quote in the French study, these traits no longer increase despite further continuous nutritional, medical, and scientific progress. This suggests that modern societies have allowed our species to reach its limits. We are the first generation to become aware of this, explains Professor Jean-Franc Toussaint from Paris Descartes University in France. Rather than continually improving, we will see a shift in the proportion of the population reaching the previously recorded maximum limits. Examples of the effects of these plateaus will be evidenced with increasingly less sport records being broken and more people reaching but not exceeding the present highest life expectancy. Dave?
However, when researchers considered how environmental and genetic limitations combined may affect the ability for us to reach these upper limits, our effect on the environment was found to play a key role. Here's a quote. "This will be one of the biggest challenges of this century, as the added pressure from anthropogenic activities will be responsible for damaging effects on human health and the environment," Professor Toussaint predicts. The current declines in human capacities we can see today are a sign that environmental changes, including climate, are already contributing to the increasing constraints we now have to consider. It goes on, observing decreasing tendencies may provide an early signal that something has changed, but not for the better. Human height has decreased in the last decade in some African countries. This suggests some societies are no longer able to provide sufficient nutrition for each of their children and maintain the health of their younger inhabitants, he explains. To avoid us being the cause of our own decline, the researchers hope their findings will encourage policymakers to focus on strategies for increasing quality of life and maximize the proportion of the population that can reach these maximum biological limits. Now that we know the limits of human species, this can act as a clear goal for nations to ensure that human capacities reach their highest possible values for most of the population. With escalating environmental constraints, this may cost increasingly more energy and investment in order to balance the rising ecosystem pressures However, if successful, we should observe an incremental rise in mean values of height, lifespan, and most human biomarkers. Professor Toussaint warns, however, the utmost challenge is now to maintain these indices at high levels. Mackie, one thing came to mind when I'm reading that, and that is Fukushima radiation still pouring into the ocean, and they want to now dump all of that radioactive water in the ocean. They've been storing.
Yes.
How? My question is, in regards to Professor Toussaint's warning, how do we maintain a healthy environment if this, I mean, I'm going to call it absurd or, obscene polluting of the environment is allowed to continue? I think our challenges have vastly increased than his, or maybe mediocre description of them.
See, these are effects we can't really control. But we do know what happens, Dave. We do, because they went to Chernobyl, right, and they looked at what happened to the wildlife there, right? Since you brought the Fukushima component up, and it's not just Fukushima, but Fukushima is probably the most catastrophic and probably the most immediate, because we know that radiation has a direct effect on the genetic material. We know that radiation can directly and usually detrimentally, but not necessarily affect genetic material. In Chernobyl, they found various changes in the wildlife and in the plant life as well. Usually, things that grown bigger or had grown odd. Like some mutations had occurred, but they found very large earthworms, very large caterpillars, things like that. So yeah, it's a good it's a very good point to bring up, and in fact, it is a point that is really important to consider within the framework of evolution and adaptation. I don't believe in a steady state theory of evolution. I don't. I don't care. I don't. I believe in equilibrium. If anything, I believe in the punctuated equilibrium, meaning that we see catastrophic changes or massive changes come very suddenly, not over thousands of generations. They come within 1 or 2 generations, and all of a sudden there's this new thing responding to outside pressures. It also informs my opinion that we're living in an artificial system, because I think only an artificial system could really act in this way. That's my opinion. Again, it could be completely wrong, but I think this system of ours here is completely artificial, and we're living in a cage, more or less. But this cage is well designed within itself, and it's self-consistent, just like the Matrix. It's completely self-consistent, and it operates within its own rules. But we know that the cage is broken; it doesn't function very well anymore. So, what can we see? We can see, certainly, I think, a greater variation in our genetic code due to Fukushima. I think you will see, Dave, over the next generation or two, birth defects, maybe the advent of Homo futura or Homo superior.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. It's right. You're right, and this is probably the single largest factor that would influence this kind of change within us. I wonder if it could turn off the switches that were built in.
Mm-hmm. I was always under the impression, from even being a little kid, that the race that got space travel would effectively lead tech to the point where they left. That those winners wouldn't bring everyone with them. They would just bring those of themselves and leave and move on, leaving the planet behind with all of the other people who didn't make it into space. Do you know what I mean? But at the moment we're seeing a lot of trade. I believe that when I was a kid, I believe there would have been more competition to keep it amongst themselves and then bugger off. Extraordinary thoughts as a kid. I didn't think that we would be at a point where we're having these discussions now, where we're finding out more about the past to the point where we believe that others have been here. I didn't think that was going to ever happen. It just had a flash. Sorry, Mackie.
No, all good. That's what this is. It's a stream of consciousness. I love it. And it gives our listeners some insight into our thought processes as well. Because sometimes we formulate ideas as we go through material or we're in conversation. This is really how Dave and I spend a lot of time together in the past, just talking and usually just joking around, but then these ideas would ferment and fall on fertile ground and grow, and all of a sudden you've got a whole new thing in front of you and you go, wow, this is quite an amazing thing. What do you reckon? Well, maybe, yeah, it could be it. But this is really what you have to do as well at home. You need to take your thoughts, you need to do your research and discuss it with people. It's no good to be an armchair researcher never talking to people. It doesn't get you anywhere, because the only opinion that you have is your own. Okay, have your opinion challenged, and I invite anyone to challenge us all the time. The more the better, because you can only truly test your theories if they're being challenged. And that's the good thing about the scientific method, of course, as a concept, to constantly challenge belief systems, right? You need to constantly challenge yourself, and ideally have someone challenge you. That's really important. And you know what? I'm still waiting for someone to come up with something better than the hypothesis. If someone has something better, I'm more than happy to publish that and become an adherent. But right now, I have seen nothing better than the hypothesis to explain all of our circumstances. But yeah, it's important. It's necessary, and it's all connected. So we will talk about things that might seem completely unrelated. Now, the next article, Dave, is really interesting, and it's quite, I don't want to say, it's a little dry, but bear with us, and we might skip some sections. Oh, actually, we won't. This is really important. So, how much of human height is genetic, and how much is due to nutrition? Okay, and this article was published by Chao Qiang Lai of the Lean Meyer U.S. Department of Agriculture Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging at the Tufts University. And you can see this yourself if you go to scientificamerican.com and you type in how much of human height. That's the name of the article, scientificamerican.com. This question can be rephrased again as how much variation, difference between individuals, in height is attributable to genetic effects and how much to nutritional effects. The short answer to this question is that about 60 to 80% of the difference in height between individuals is determined by genetic factors, whereas 20 to 40% can be attributed to environmental effects, and that's mostly nutrition, but not only nutrition. This answer is based on estimates of the heritability on human height, the proportion of the total variation in height due to genetic factors. I do want to say one thing here, though. Bees. I want you to think about bees and even ants, but specifically bees. Bees are structured in a fairly highly restricted society. So each bee has a function. Each bee has this function, in fact, before birth. But how is this achieved? Well, the way it is achieved is through nutrition. The queen, or the future queen, larvae, are fed something called gelée royale, or royal jelly. Correct. Which is it's not honey. It is better than honey. All right. It's got a whole bunch of extra nutrients and vitamins and wonderful things. And
obviously some chemicals in there.
Oh, absolutely. That allow the larvae, and these are the same eggs from the same bee. Okay. But getting different foods. So the bee, the queen lays all these eggs. They're all the same. They're all the same eggs. And then they're taken into the hive, into the little chambers. They put them there. And they're being fed. It's like a nursery. And the future queens get royal jelly, and the others do not. The others get like a honey thing, like watered down, honey sugar mixture, and it's good enough to make them into what they need to be. But here in this case, the differences in this is also size. A queen is much larger, of course, than a worker bee. All of these things are triggered completely by nutrition. The genetic code is there to be activated. Of course it is, right? As it is in us. So all of us carry a giant's gene and a dwarf's gene within our material. Okay, because we're part of the human race. It's just the way it is. Now, yeah, so bees, entirely through nutrition, right, are conditioned to various sizes and various functions. I just wanted to put it out there as a thing that actually happens. I think something similar may be possible for us. And I'm thinking here of mana, of course. I'm thinking of white gold powder. And we have still no idea what all the effects of white gold. No, we haven't mentioned white gold powder in a long, long time.
Like show 2 or 3, wasn't it?
It was actually. But the monatomic elements may very well, of the platinum group that is, the monatomic elements of the platinum group may very well be that kind of superfood that can determine our biological form as well, internally and externally, right? Depending on at what time in your life cycle you start taking it. Now, human height is a quantitative or metric trait, which means a characteristic that is measured in quantity and is controlled by multiple genes and environmental factors. Many studies have estimated the heritability of human height. Often these studies determine heritability by estimating the degree of resemblance between relatives. One can separate genetic effect from environmental effect by correlating genetic similarity between relatives, twin, siblings, parents, offspring, and so forth, with their similarity in height. To accurately measure how genetically similar relatives are, one can measure the number of genetic markers they share. For example, Peter M. Vischer of the Queensland Institute of Medical Research in Australia recently reported that the heritability of height is 80% based on 3,375 pairs of Australian twins and siblings. This estimate is considered to be unbiased as it was based on a large population of twins and siblings and a broad survey of genetic markers. In the US, the heritability of height was estimated as 80% for white men. These estimates are well supported by another study of 8,798 pairs of Finnish twins, in which the heritability was 78% for men and 75% for women. Other studies have shown height heritability among whites, yet again, to be even higher than 80%. Interesting, that leaves 20% to other factors, of course. Because different ethnic populations have different genetic backgrounds and live in different environments, however, height heritability can vary from one population to another, and even from men to women. In Asian populations, the heritability of height is much lower than 80%. For example, in 2004, Miao Xin Li of Hunan Normal University, I'm not making it up, Hunan Normal University in China, and his colleagues, I want to go to Abnormal University, thank you, and his colleagues estimated a height heritability of 65% based on a Chinese population of 385 families. In African populations, height heritability is also lower, 65% for the population of Western Africa, according to a 1978 study by D.F. Roberts, then at Newcastle University in England, and colleagues. Such diversities in heritability are mainly due to the different genetic backgrounds of ethnic groups and distinct environments. And that includes, of course, climates, dietary habits, and lifestyle they experience. Heritability allows us to examine how genetics directly impact an individual's height. For example, a population of white men has a heritability of 80% and an average height of 178 centimeters. It's about 5 feet 10. If we meet a white man in the street who's 183 centimeters tall, about 6 feet, the heritability tells us what fraction of his extra height is caused by genetic variance and what fraction is due to his environment, which is dietary habit and lifestyle. The man is 5 centimeters taller than average. Thus, 80% of the extra 5 centimeters, or 4 centimeters, is due to genetic variance, whereas 1 centimeter is due to environmental effects, such as nutrition. Interesting. Dave?
Heritability can also be used to predict an individual's height if the parents' heights are known. For example, say a man 175 centimeters tall marries a woman 165 centimeters tall. That's a 10 centimeter difference where she's shorter. And both are from a Chinese population with a population mean of 170 for men and 160 for women. That's 5 centimeters shorter in both cases. We can predict the height of their children, assuming the heritability is 65% for men and 60% for women in this population. For a son, the expected height of a son is 170 plus 3.2 or 173.2 centimeters, and of a daughter 163 centimeters. That's adding 3 centimeters. On the other hand, environmental effects can add 1.75 centimeters to a son's height. That's 0.35 times 175 minus 170, then plus 165 minus 160 divided by 2, and 2 centimeters to a daughter. And I won't say the same equation again. Of course, these predictions only reflect the mean expected height for each of the 2 siblings, brother and sister. The actual observed height may be different. There's a disclaimer if I've ever read one. From these calculations, we realize the environment, mainly nutrients, can only change about 2 centimeters for a given offspring's height in this Chinese population. Does that mean that no matter what happens in the child's environment, the height can never change more than this? Can special treatment and nutrient supplements increase the height further? The answer is yes. You might be surprised to hear that. The most important nutrient for final height is protein in childhood. Minerals, in particular calcium and vitamin A and D, also influence height. Because of this, malnutrition in children is detrimental to height. In general, boys will reach maximum height in their late teens, whereas girls reach their maximum heights around mid-teens. Thus, adequate nutrition before puberty is crucial for height. In addition, I'll do this last paragraph. In addition, although diseases of childhood can inhibit ultimate stature, human growth hormone treatments can remedy such growth defects. Height accelerated by such treatment or special supplements, however, cannot be predicted based on heritability. There are 2 reasons. First, heritability has not been established in a growth hormone treated population. Second, genes and growth hormones can interact synergistically to affect height, i.e. their effects may not be simply adding to each other, but could be multiplying the ultimate effect. Meki.
Interesting. The question remains, however, why different populations of a similar genetic background might have a different heritability. The answer is, of course, environmental effects. When a given environment maximizes the genetic potential of a population for a given trait, this population tends to have a higher heritability for that trait and vice versa. In developed countries, nutrition for childhood development is strong, which maximizes the genetic potential for height, assuming no selection or new mutations occur. Thus, the overall heritability estimates tend to be higher, for example, 80%. In contrast, in developing countries, nutrition deficits lead to a lower heritability. The fact that the mean height of the US population has almost plateaued in the past decade suggests the nutrient environment has almost maximized the genetic potential of height, at least in this country. Improved nutrition elsewhere may have similar benefits in terms of stature. Two things. One, it just tells us here that we all have the genetic markers. We all have the genetic information for extra height. So that's the first thing to take away from this. Okay, but in my opinion, up to a certain point, due to the tinkering that's been done on our genes. Second, I don't think the US has plateaued out because they're all eating so well. I think it's plateaued out because they're eating all so awfully. No, it is true. The American diet. I'm being very generic here, and I'm generalizing quite a bit. But the American diet has gotten from pretty good to horrendous, horrible, right? America is suffering from an obesity epidemic. It's suffering from food-related behavioral issues. Okay, sugar, colors, chemicals, all of that stuff, like near food, not whole food, but near food.
Yeah, pre-chewed food too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's being given to American children. And one of my favorite documentaries is Super Size Me. I really love that. Morgan Spurlock. Right? Yeah, he did, right? Oh, I got to make gurgles. And Morgan Spurlock did an amazing job. It was a very low-budget documentary, but all he did was for 30 days, I'm just going to eat McDonald's. And every time they say, Super Size Me, I'll say yes. So what he did, though, as part of it, he went to great length in his research. He went to this one school specifically, and I want to share this with you. I have before, but not everybody listens all the time, and there might be new listeners out there. Hello, by the way, any new listeners. So he went to this one school, which had essentially got all the troublemakers of that school's district. So if you had been kicked out of any other school in that district, you would go to that school. Because in America, and in most Western countries, you have the right to go to school up to a certain age, right? I mean, you might be a disciplinary case, but you still have the right to go to school and learn. So this particular school would collect all these troubled children and try to stabilize them, educate them. What they found, and it was a profound finding, is that when they changed the diet of the children in school, for school lunches and so forth, there would be a marked improvement in performance and behavior of those children. So they got rid of all soda machines, no sugary drinks, none of that, no processed food, none of that, but only freshly cooked meals and fresh juices or water and things like that as a drink. Nothing that would be consumed by the average American teenager, I guess. Now, not everybody is affected in the same way, because we're all different, right? And this is really the point here. These are the people that were affected the worst by a bad diet, by bad nutrition. So this school then took them all in, gave them good food, and for the most part, they had no more of a disciplinary issue than any other school. And these are all the students that had been kicked out everywhere else for issues, right? Remember that. This is not a regular population. This is the worst of the worst, okay? So you'd expect that it would be horrible, but it wasn't, because the diet was changed. So my point here is, number one, I think it has leveled out because the diet of the American people has gone, down the tubes. And secondly, I don't think that we can go much further in height. We could probably go a little bit further, but not much further because of the restrictions that were built into us, right? I think that's really key to understand. And I also believe that all of us have the potential to be taller once those genetic switches are flicked, right? Which brings us to the next, and we can probably share a bit of that. Actually, no, you can do the whole article, dude. You can do it. This is human. Now we have to look at something called the human growth hormone, age-related human growth hormone decline, age-related HGH decline. Dave?
Human growth hormone, or HGH, if you are Sylvester Stallone, declines with age in every animal species. And I meant that because he was caught transporting that when he came to Australia. In humans, after the age of 20 to 30, HGH levels decline 14 to 15% every 10 years. By the age of 60, HGH is usually less than half of what it was at 25. At 20, our pituitary produces about 500 milligrams a day. At 40, 200. And at 60, it's down to 25 milligrams per day. IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor. Oh, I get that now. That's really funny. So IGF, insulin-like growth factor, mirrors that same decline. While HGH is released in tiny spurts, more at night, it is only viable in the blood for a few minutes. It stimulates IGF-1 to be released by the liver and has a much longer half-life. Therefore, it is easier to measure the IGF-1 levels in the blood as an indicator of how much HGH is released than it is to try to catch the tiny amounts of HGH when they are re-released sporadically. Daniel Rudman, MD, the main pioneer researcher of HGH in 1986, determined IGF-1 levels under 350 to be indicative of deficiency. He found that from age 20 to 40, 95% of healthy men have IGF-1 levels greater than 350. However, after 60 years old, 30% of the healthy men drop below 350. And after 65 years old, well, over 50% of the population have very low levels of HGH. However, when properly stimulated, the pituitary gland has the ability to release as much HGH as it did during its 20s. Its ability to produce hormone does not decline. On the other hand, the hypothalamus, which stimulates HGH levels to begin with, becomes less responsive to the body's request for GH as we age. In fact, it also secretes somatostatin.
Somatostatin.
There you go, somatostatin. Somatostatin,
That's it.
which suppresses HGH and other hormones, causing aging. Yeah, there you go. I'll let you read through the points. You can hand it there. So, from this breakthrough, pioneer work in 1986 using recombinant injectable growth hormone on a group of seniors, Dr. Rudman and his team discovered the following body improvements. Here, you ready?
Oh, okay. So memory improvement, fewer wrinkles, thicker skin with more collagen, less cellulite, better vision, increased energy, better exercise performance, and an 8.8% increased muscle mass, 14.4% reduction in body fat, a stronger heart with improved cardiac output, stronger bones, decreased osteoporosis, improved wound healing, organ revitalization, and shorter healing time for wounds. Hello? Hello? Anybody home?
Yeah, hello. Oh, what was his name again? Thanks for that. So, just as our face wrinkles and body parts droop and loosen, so do our organs decrease in size and output with age. However, bodybuilders who inject high levels of HGH have been known to develop an enlarged abdomen due to the fact that the HGH has actually increased the size and output of their organs. In updating the original Rudman study reported in JAMA 9N 1968, Dr. Cass Terry MD, PhD, in 1999 reported on a study completed by Blackman and Harmon, which looked into 125 patients, 71 males, 52 females, and they were aged 65 to 88. They were receiving high injections of over a 6-month period of time. HGH injections over a 6-month period. The results proved the ability to reverse aging by raising hormones to the levels of healthy young adults. In a study, one group was given just growth hormone via injection, while the other males were injected with a combination of HGH and testosterone. The female group received a combination of HGH and estrogen. A third group was given a placebo. Meki.
Impressive anti-aging results were astounding, with improvements in the following. Attitude and emotional stability improved in 62% of patients. Energy levels increased in 84% of patients. Skin texture, thickness, and elasticity improved in over 68% of patients. Frequency and duration of sexual intercourse improved in nearly 75% of patients. And that alone should be enough.
That's worth it right there.
Yeah. So practically all HGH studies since the original by Rudman demonstrate the above improvements. And the sources are Dr. Ron Klutz, MD, Dr. Bob Goldman, MD, and Dr. Nick Delgado, MD. And this came from www.worldhealth.net. And look, what can I say? I mean, the point that we try to make here is that there are a lot of factors within the human body which are turning off. These things and for no good reason. There's no good reason, Dave, for these things to turn off, except that they're turning off at a certain age. You can see there's a massive decline in the production of the human growth hormone, right? And by the time you're 60 years old, you're producing like half of what you used to produce. No longer enough to live or to be healthy and stay young. So the combination of HGH, okay, somatostatin, as well as telomerase. So this is not just a single silver bullet kind of thing. There's a whole bunch of different hormones, enzymes, and chemicals that work together to bring about this kill switch operation. Certainly the most detrimental to us is telomerase, because it directly affects cell health, okay, and leads to very visible signs of aging. But we can see here now that HGH is important as well. The human growth hormone, which of course we say, of course, Mickey, that's normal. That makes perfect sense. It declines as you get older. Why? Why do you say that? Why do you say it makes perfect sense? It makes no sense at all. What is the evolutionary advantage? Let's talk about evolution for a second. In aging, what is it? Give me the evolutionary advantage in aging. Not death. I'm not talking about death here. I'm talking about aging. What is the advantage of aging? Zero. There isn't one. None. There are a whole bunch of factors that exist. Sleep is one of them, right? Unless you take the hypothesis view on sleep. That makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, none. And this aging bit is one of the biggest bugbears for me, because aging makes no sense. Oh, because the body gets used up. No, it doesn't get used up. It stops protecting itself. It stops protecting itself. It could, and we know it could, because we can restart the process. Hell, cancer cells restart the process to protect themselves. Cancer cells turn on the telomerase.
That's right.
Okay, to protect the telomeres, to protect themselves, to protect. So you know, frankly speaking, cancer cells are immortal. Okay, aging makes no sense. Oh, it's a fact of life. Yes, no argument from me that it is. For us, it is. For us, it is. Go to the texts. This was the curse they burdened us with. They, the ones who made us. That's the music, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
it is. All right, stay tuned for a roundtable with Jer Bear. Don't miss out. Become part of Radio. Be part of it, and you know you may get your point across, and I really like that about it. Thanks for listening to another Shiny Side Out. Stay tuned for next week's 376th show. Take care, everyone.